Welcome back to Illinois Lawmakers weekly coverage of the Illinois General Assembly in its spring session. I'm Jak Tichenor along with Jerry Nowicki, who is the editor-in-chief of Capital News Illinois, our partner in this enterprise. Jerry, good to have you back on the program. Interesting week at the Capitol, but a lot of the focus was away from here in New Hampshire, where Governor J.B. Pritzker gave a fiery speech to New Hampshire Democrats. And I'm wondering, all of this, of course, has a lot of speculation being fueled about, does he have White House ambitions in the next election?
Yeah, I mean, everything he's doing certainly points in that direction, right? And now the thing he'll say is that he's just talking about how to get the Democrats sort of in line for 2026, to have the right message, to be talking to people, and just sort of focusing really on Donald Trump and that type of thing.
He was hard on Republicans in that speech, but he also had some strong words for Democrats about those who sit and talk about a lot of stuff but don't actually get anything done.
Right, and that's sort of the whole driver too, that he's saying he's talking about 2026 now, because they need a voice like his in this cycle to sort of say the things he does, when you have other Democrats, say Gavin Newsom, who's having people like Steve Bannon on his podcast. Ben Zielinski, our reporter, did some reporting that Pritzker's sort of choosing a lane that's different than what Newsom and Rahm Emanuel have been talking about. So just sort of, he's definitely on the more progressive edge type of thing.
At this point, the governor's still trying to kind of damp down some of the speculation on that, saying he hasn't even decided at this point if he's going to run for a third term.
Yeah, certainly that's what he's saying, but I do think he sort of revels in the national spotlight, obviously, or he wouldn't keep doing events like this to get his name out there and his face out there.
We're just a few weeks away from the legislature's scheduled adjournment on May 31st, and there's still an awful lot we don't know about the big issues like the budget. What are your sources telling you about the kinds of negotiations the budgeteers are doing behind the scenes?
You know, it's hard to kind of get any of that out of this session, because just there's so much happening day by day. One of the big things that could blow a hole in the budget or really change the way Illinois does things is any altering of Medicaid at the federal level and type of health care benefits, and that it just really, if you get some of the things people are fearing in terms of cuts, you have to go back to the drawing board and say, okay, well, what do we want to make up for? You know, what buckets can we pull from to make sure people don't lose health coverage and stuff like that. So it's hard to really pinpoint anything with the level of uncertainty.
In the next couple of minutes, I want to go to another issue that a lot of people in northeastern Illinois and Chicago are looking at, and that has to do with trying to figure a way to deal with the fiscal cliff that all the mass transit agencies are facing up there. It's close to $1 billion in shortfall. Is there any kind of consensus starting to emerge on how lawmakers want to handle this?
Yeah, our reporting recently has been that they're pretty close on the governance side of things. Now, I don't know to what extent those reforms will be tied to funding, because obviously the amount of funding, hundreds of millions of dollars, isn't something you just pull out of thin air, especially having what we've said about the uncertainty here. So there seems to be some level of goodwill among the negotiators, but the details, an idea is different than bill language, and we still haven't seen bill language. We still don't know where the line item's going to come from, if any more money is going to be kicked to them in this session. So I think we're still got a long way to go there.
If they don't land the airplane at the end of the session, what happens to writers who need to go to work?
Yeah, they say, the transit agencies say it'll be dire circumstances. Probably difficult to quantify what that'd mean for someone who's trying to catch a bus, but you would assume decreased services, just a lesser amount of available buses. And you talk to people in Chicago and they talk about ghost buses, and they're already having issues.
Jerry Nowicki, we will stay tuned on that. Thank you very much for your time and your expertise on Illinois Lawmakers.
Thank you, Jak.
Democratic House Majority Leader Robyn Gabel of Evanston is our leadoff guest on this week's edition of Illinois Lawmakers. Great to have you back on the program, Leader.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me.
We're about 5 weeks away from adjournment on May 31st. A lot of big issues are still out there to be decided. Let's start with the budget. We knew that going into this, it was going to be a tight year. And there's still a lot that we don't know about what the federal government's decisions are going to do in terms of impacting people here in the state of Illinois. What is your biggest concern about what Washington and the Trump administration might do?
My biggest concern is the Medicaid budget. That's almost over $20 billion in our budget, and that will have a big impact on not only individual people, but hospitals and much of the healthcare system here in Illinois.
At this point, we've heard figures batted about as much as an $800 billion cut over years, and a lot of that would impact things like the Affordable Care Act expansion in the state of Illinois. That's something like 700,000 people.
True, it's almost 800,000, and we are concerned about that. That's been really an incredible blessing to the people in the state. It has covered 800,000 people who did not have health insurance before this. I have not heard that that's going to be affected per se, so we're still hoping that that program will remain the same. It really has been so helpful to so many states in this country, red states, purple states, as well as blue states. So we're hoping that will stay.
One of the things I wanted to ask you about has to do, of course, with another major issue that lawmakers are considering this year, and that has to do with the mass transit situation in Chicago and all the surrounding counties. That includes, of course, your home city of Evanston. They're looking at something like a $1 billion shortfall because of the fact they were using federal COVID funds to keep things going. That money's going away. What are you hearing about the negotiations as far as how this is going to pan out before the end of session?
Mm-hmm. What I hear is that conceptually there's a lot of agreement on kind of what needs to be done and what kind of system we're looking to have. I mean, we're looking to have a coordinated system where people can easily move from Metra to PACE to CTA. We're looking for a system where there's safety, where there's, in my district, we just had a transit hearing, and some of the comments made were we'd like there to be a phone number you can text to and get help on the transit line immediately without having to be heard or pull something. Or they are people, in my district, people use transit all the time. We have a lot of homes being built right near transit, particularly larger condo buildings and apartment buildings, and so those are some of the things that we're interested in, making sure it's easier for the rider. One of the younger members of the community mentioned that we should have scooters there as well, so that they can get around easier.
That's interesting because they just instituted something like that in my own hometown of Carbondale, and it's fascinating to watch that at work.
Good to know.
You said that they seem to be coming closer conceptually to an agreement on this. Does this involve, as some of the published reports have said, a more robust version of the regional transit agency administration?
It's just been in very high level concepts to me. So I can't really go into detail on that right now, but as you said, we have 5 weeks left and we expect to hear some more news about that.
If the transit agencies don't receive some of this funding that they're going to be lacking fairly shortly, it's been described by some transit officials as a potential nightmare for riders. Does the deal have to be done in conjunction with the funding by the end of May?
From what I'm hearing, not necessarily. Not necessarily.
Wanted to ask, we've got about a minute left. I wanted to ask, do you have an update for us on the End of Life Options Act that would authorize medical aid in dying?
Dying, sure. We made a decision that the bill was going to go through the Senate first and then come to the House. And that bill is still, it's on the floor now in the Senate, and we expect it to come over soon. I'm already talking to colleagues about the bill, and we're building our 60-member vote count on it, and it's going very well.
So you think that that may be something that lawmakers will decide on before the end of session?
Yes.
Leader Gabel, thank you so much for your time on Illinois Lawmakers. Always a pleasure having you on the program.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Joining us now on Illinois Lawmakers, Republican State Representative Charles Meier of Okawville. He's the Republican spokesperson on the House Agriculture and Conservation Committee, as well as the House Child Care Access and Early Childhood Committee. Welcome to the program.
Well, I'm glad to be here today.
Let's start with agriculture and conservation. You recently had success with unanimous passage of House Bill 2196, and this is geared toward the poultry industry in the state of Illinois. And my understanding of the gist of the bill is the idea is to cut down on the red tape that smaller operators are facing.
Right. You know, our small specialty crops, and this is like a specialty crop, it's helping our small farmers be able to raise a family, and we mimic it off the surrounding states around us. So it's allowing the amount of poultry they can sell off the farm from 5,000 to 7,500, and it's going to give them the opportunity to do this at farmers markets also. They're still not going to be able to sell at restaurants and other places, but they will be sold at farmers markets. They will be labeled that they have not been through a federal inspection process. They will be kept properly. Your local health departments can come and check on that. But it's a bill to help those families expand, raise their families, keep them on their family farm, and give them a little more chance of making an honest living in Illinois. And the consumer, they'll have fresher chicken. They'll know where it came from. It came from so-and-so's farm right down the road.
You had stakeholders working on this legislation with you, like the Illinois Farm Bureau, Department of Agriculture, Stewardship Alliance, and the like. How did that all come together to make this bill pass with, a complete majority?
We started on it with a total of asking for 20,000 chickens, so it would totally mimic the neighboring states. We listened to what the health departments and other ones were saying in this as we worked towards it. There was some question about the issue of the avian flu with this bill, but right now we only had 6 processors in the state of Illinois doing chickens. One of them's gone out of business, another one's only doing it for their own poultry. And so we think you have better chance of spreading avian flu if you're transporting your chickens 3 or 4 hours down the road than processing them right on your own farm. And to get an appointment to process at these plants is 6 to 8 months off to the future. This way, the Illinois consumer can go right down there to that farm or to that farmer's market and buy a chicken that was processed this morning and fry it tonight.
So the bill's now over in the Senate. You're expecting action on that before adjournment?
We're hoping to get it passed before adjournment, and we'll see how it runs. Like I said, we've listened. We've modified this bill with several amendments to get it to the point where we had a unanimous passage in the House.
There's another bill, actually it's a resolution, House Resolution 85, and this has to do with some criticism that you and a number of your Republican colleagues have for the Illinois Department of Human Services and how it handles cases at community integrated living arrangements, or CILAs. Can you give us the gist of that as well?
Well, this bill will address CILAs as well as SODCs. I'm against any abuse anywhere. And when there's an investigation filed, which there frequently are, and I turned one in myself yesterday, and because I will not stand for abuse anywhere. These are our most vulnerable citizens. But these reports are taking up to 1.5 years to be ruled on. At the same time, the person that's accused may be falsely accused, but they're not working, but they're receiving a paycheck, or maybe they're working a different job. But we don't have enough workers for our CILAs. We don't have enough workers for our SODCs. We're paying those workers overtime while this is going on. And who can testify a year later of what happened? We need these investigations to go on frequently, quickly. They're happening faster on the on-site place, but they sit in Springfield on a desk and nobody looks at them for months after that. and that's wasting taxpayer dollars, and that's putting our most vulnerable people at risk.
We got less than a minute left. One of your Democratic colleagues, Lindsley LaPointe, is looking into the idea of forming a commission to examine the problem of low wages, particularly in the silos.
Yes, and our silo workers need to be paid better. A lot of them are just fresh out of high school. They have no training how to take care of a person with disabilities. We need to keep our good workers there. They need to receive a living wage. The state of Illinois seems to waste a lot of money on things that we shouldn't, and I believe our money should be invested into our most vulnerable. And when we look at the billions of dollars it seems like that's been spent on immigration, illegal immigration, we've got to do something for our most vulnerable here right now.
Republican State Representative Charlie Meier of Okawville, thanks very much for your time on Illinois Lawmakers.
Thank you.
Up next on Illinois Lawmakers, we want to welcome back to the program Senate Majority Whip Robert Peters of Chicago. Good to have you back, sir.
Of course, thanks for having me.
You've got a number of bills under consideration this spring in the Illinois Senate. Let's start with Senate Bill 1976, the Illinois Workers' Rights and Safety Act. It's a direct response to the Trump administration's decision to cut a large number of employees from the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Safety Health. What is NIOSH and what does it do, and how is it going to impact Illinois if these cuts go through?
Yeah, so, the fact is the Trump administration is particularly hostile to a lot of workers' rights protections, not only in terms of firing employees, not only in terms of an aggressive stance toward the NLRB. He's just taken sort of this stance that I would say is not friendly to the worker, whether it's the protections or the safety. And so the reason why we have this bill here is to protect the standards that existed before January 20th of this year. And the hope is that, we can actually fight and keep those protections for the next 4 years and keep people safe in the workplace as much as possible. So we want to make sure that just in terms of the protections that people have, that if they get decreased at the federal level, that doesn't spark a decrease of worker protections at the state level.
How would this actually work? You're talking about federal regulations that are in place and all the oversight that goes along with it. How would the state of Illinois ensure that all of that is taken care of?
Yeah, so we're having ongoing conversations, but we have the Department of Labor and we have the AG's office. Those are two entities that often do a good amount of the worker protections that we have in the state. So the hope is that they take on that work. Now, as we have those conversations, that could open up, I think, to whether that's third parties playing a role in worker protections, which we've done in previous legislations around worker protections. But right now, the Department of Labor and the AG would play a key role here.
How does a state have the power to enforce a law or regulation that is tougher than what the feds do?
Well, the fact of the matter is that it's just saying the state standards are the same as the federal standards before this certain date. Now, even if the federal standards are, they become weakened, the state can still have stricter standards. We as a state pass a law to say, okay, we do a bit more on this. So we've seen this in multiple pieces of legislation where the state of Illinois is looking out for people a little bit more aggressively than the federal government. This is just us adding now this part of worker protections to it.
We're heading into the home stretch. Where does it stand as far as actually passing the Senate?
I feel pretty confident. We have the AFL-CIO is the reason I'm carrying this bill. I'm very grateful for them. That people have been active in trying to figure out how to respond to the federal administration and its aggressive anti-worker, anti-consumer behavior. So I feel pretty positive that we'll be able to get this done.
Got a couple of minutes left.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about Senate Bill 62, which would create a new state-level housing tax credit to try to capture federal funds, like a lot of other states do, for developing new rental property.
Yeah, so the affordable housing tax credit we're trying to get done is also sort of a workforce development tax credit. As we're bringing in more and more businesses, we need to continue to grow and expand our housing options for folks. I think of Illinois as a place that should be seen as a destination. And I think people in Illinois should be proud to be from the state of Illinois. And one way we can continue to push on being that destination is by being able to bring more affordable housing to folks, easing the housing market, and at the same time, moving people who don't need to rent and be able to help them become a first-time home buyer. So I think right now when it comes to housing, we need to have a yes-and approach, and we need to take advantage of the fact that while other states are trying to damage women's rights or trying to damage LGBTQ rights or trying to damage workers' rights or trying to damage civil rights, that Illinois has been continuing to strengthen them. We need to provide the housing so that people who may want to move into the state and live their life and have some comfort, have some dignity, and have some constitutional protections have a place to live.
Got less than a half minute to go. Same question as before. Where does this stand as far as the bill-making process over in the Senate?
Yeah, I feel pretty positive about it. We have, Senator Patrick Joyce is on the bill. It's showing that it's just got broad-based support, whether you're progressive, you're moderate, it doesn't matter. It's become a workforce development bill that's gotten a lot of support within the caucus. My hope is that we'll be able to get it done in the budget.
Senator Robert Peters of Chicago, Democrat, thank you so much for your time on Illinois Lawmakers. Good to have you.
Definitely. Thank you for having me.
Senate Republican Whip Sally Turner of Beason joins us now on Illinois Lawmakers. Glad to have you on the program.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jack.
You're a member of the Senate Agriculture Committee, and as we sit down to talk on a Thursday morning, you're getting ready to have a hearing at 9 o'clock. What are things coming up before your committee today?
Oh, sure. I think we have some deer legislation coming up today. Senator Chesney is the chair of Ag for us. And so generally we meet right before Ag and talk a little bit about here's what we got going on and how we feel about the votes. Generally Ag is one that's pretty much all agreed. We usually have a really good committee and it goes by fairly quickly unless there's someone that wants to talk about the bill in depth so that we can get some information, subject matter there on the record. But I know we have some deer legislation coming up. It has to do with landowners being able to hunt their deer. At many times other than just during deer season. That's one of them I know that's in the books.
And you've had success with a bill, Senate Bill 2372. Like a lot of sectors of the economy, farming is impacted by an aging population. A lot of farmers are ready for retirement. And where does that leave young farmers trying to crack the market, trying to buy land, trying to get their place in the marketplace?
Sure, and that's a great point. I grew up on the farm, and my son's a farmer, and so all the young people I know of his age, he's 37, but all the kids that I know of his age farm, and they're really having a difficult time getting into that marketplace. And like you mentioned, most farmers are aging out. They're like in the mid-60s, I think, as the average here in Illinois. A lot of times when their daughters or sons get out of school, they have a couple of years where they wait a while, work off the farm, things of that nature. And by the time they're 25, they're looking to, let's get on the farm, I'd really like to do this. And dad's not ready to retire yet. So it's very difficult for them to get into the business, whether it be with dad or on their own. So what this legislation does is it forms a commission. And in that commission, there's various members that are part of that commission, but most young farmers don't know the aids that are out there. FSA office has low interest loans for the purchase of farm equipment, for the purchase of land. So many things are out there that they have no idea about because they aren't using FSA or some of the other tools that they have at their fingertips. So what this would do is kind of like a one-stop shop. Where would a young farmer go to find out about all these avenues and that could help them get started? Kind of like the small business things that we have with DCEO. Same idea, different profession.
Would there be specific legislation following that to give them help?
We don't have any. If it's Department of Ag is who it's through. If they need help trying to have some guardrails on what they want to do specifically, we'd be happy to. But right now, I think they're the perfect agency to be able to navigate this with our young people.
In the time we have left, I want to ask you about the Logan Correctional
Sure.
Center. It's been a year since the Pritzker administration announced plans to close that facility, build 2 new prisons where Stateville is currently located. That's a big impact on your district, some 500 jobs at stake.
Sure. It's interesting that you said to build at Stateville. We don't even know if they're going to build at Stateville yet. That's the last update that we had, was that they were reaching out to do RFPs for to look at which site is better served to have Logan Correctional Center. It's still going to be called Logan Correctional Center, whether it be at Stateville or down here, is what our understanding was. Right now, we don't have any more updates. They are still advertising for positions out there. They're open. I understand there's only about 40% fill rate right now, which is very low. And I understand they're still doing some work to keep it updated. Other than that, we're depending on the unions to be able to continue to navigate that.
And we still haven't heard what the legislature's committee on forecasting and accountability has to say about that. That's the bipartisan, bicameral committee that is supposed to make a determination on this.
And that's right. We had 2 hearings on that. One of them was in town in Lincoln, and we had a huge turnout on that. But you're right, we don't have any specifics from that.
So we're still waiting on that word. We will stay tuned and see what happens. Senator Sally Turner, thank you so much for your time on Illinois Lawmakers.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Illinois Lawmakers continues. We're with Jerry Nowicki of Capital News, Illinois. Jerry, so many things still, as we were talking about earlier at the top of the program, still hanging fire at this point. If you had to look ahead to the next week or so, it's a trick question, of course, but what would be the headlines next week if you had to make a guess?
To me, we're going to be talking a lot about the Commission on Government Forecasting and Accountability's revenue report, because generally beginning of May, beginning of the month is when you get that report, and then the heads of those agencies, the heads of the budgeting agencies, go before committees and they talk about where we're at with revenue. So we're going to get a much clearer picture, with April revenues totally completed, that, where we're at as a state, what the gap might be, whether it's grown, whether it's shrunk, whether there's going to need to be more cuts or more revenues, or we'll just have a much clearer picture.
And the April numbers are crucial because that's when we see what the individual income tax receipts were and corporate income tax receipts are. So that's the last snapshot of our finances before lawmakers go home.
Yeah, April 15th obviously is a big day for taxpayers. Hopefully you've paid yours, but yeah, so April, it's a big month.
So we'll be waiting for that news next week. Do we have a deadline in mind at this point? Just sometime next week?
Yeah, I believe sometime next week.
Okay. Jerry Nowicki, Editor-in-Chief for Capital News, Illinois. We appreciate your time on Illinois Lawmakers. And that brings our program to a close for this week. We will be back next week with another edition of Illinois Lawmakers. For all of us at Capital News, Illinois, so long from Springfield.